So we're only about 5 or 6 days away from the launch of XDefiant now. It is so close and it feels amazing to say that after so long. But with the way this game has sort of dragged out over the last year or so, I think there is actually a lot of missing information for a lot of people who either knew about the game a year ago and then kind of forgot about it, or learned about the game recently but didn't know much about it a year or two ago. And that would leave there definitely being some information gaps with how long the lead up has been. And so today I'm going to walk you guys through every single thing you need to know about XDefiant, from exactly what type of game it is to different mechanics and systems, every single piece of content it is launching with, as well as everything we know we're getting post-launch too. Now, starting off with, I guess, how the game plays and what type of game it is. I'm sure most of you guys would know by now, but for those who don't, XDefiant is a typical sort of 6v6 arena shooter, but it does have a few hero elements to it that is the factions from different Ubisoft games. Now, I'm sure you can tell by the gameplay, but this game does play a fair bit like Call of Duty. It isn't identical or anything like that, but it definitely has taken a lot of inspiration from Call of Duty. And even Mark Rubin, who is essentially leading the development on this game, he used to work on the old Call of Duty games. He is actually the guy on the cover of the original Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2 covers. So there is definitely a lot of inspiration from Call of Duty, but it does have its own twist on it as well. One of the main differences, I would say, between Call of Duty, at least the modern Call of Duties, and this game is that XDefiant does have a slightly longer time to kill. It's not drastically long or anything like that, but compared to current day Call of Duty, where sometimes it feels like you can shoot someone twice and they will die, it isn't quite like that in XDefiant. And I think that adds a little bit of a skill gap where it does actually require a bit more skill rather than just who has the fastest reactions. Now, I touched on the hero elements, and like I said, they are sort of taking different factions from different popular Ubisoft games, and each faction has their own passive ability, their own regular ability, and an ultimate as well. And that is where that sort of hero element comes in. It's not quite a hero shooter, but it sort of plays into that just a little bit. XDefiant will have crossplay between PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, as well as PC, but it will also have input-based matchmaking, allowing you to essentially only play against controller players if you play on controller, or vice versa. If you're on keyboard and mouse, you can opt to only play against keyboard and mouse as well. I believe you can turn that off, but obviously the game isn't here yet, so I can't look at the settings to double check that. But I think that will make a lot of people very happy with the whole discussion that goes on with aim assist versus keyboard and mouse. Something else that is very similar to Call of Duty as well is the typical like customizable loadouts with plenty of different attachment options. It is fairly similar to the current Call of Duties in that sense, where you have a sort of pick 5 system. There are about 6 or 7 slots for attachments on most weapons, and you can essentially choose 5 different attachments from each of those slots and sort of make the weapon the way that you want it, which will obviously change the balancing quite a bit. Overall, to just sum up how the game plays and I guess what this game is, the best way to sum it up is that it is pretty much old school Call of Duty with a slight twist. Some people may take that as a negative because they don't want the game to feel like Call of Duty. It doesn't feel like the modern day Call of Duties, and I think that's why a lot of people are very interested. It does feel like much more of a sort of old school, typical arena / arcade shooter that Call of Duty obviously had a monopoly on back in the day. It does feel like this game would have done amazingly well back in the 2010, 2011, 2012 sort of period. And because I think so many people want that experience these days, that is why I think so many people are excited for XDefiant. Now, with that being said, I think the most important factor for lots of people is that this game has no skill-based matchmaking, and that is something that not only Call of Duty, but just so many shooters out there these days are completely riddled with, in my opinion. Skill-based matchmaking has essentially taken over, and it means that every game is essentially just a simulation where everyone ends up getting the same amount of kills and deaths pretty much every single game. Like I said though, XDefiant will not be having skill-based matchmaking. Now, there will be SBMM in the welcome playlist, which is essentially a playlist where if you're newer to the game or just less experienced, you can still choose that welcome playlist. That'll just put you into lobbies that do have SBMM, meaning that if you're new to the game, you don't have to get shat on by people who have been playing for a year, for example. And so in that sense, there is skill-based matchmaking, but again, that is completely optional, and the welcome playlist will not be the main way to play the game. Therefore, if you just load into a regular casual mode, there will still be 0 skill-based matchmaking. The matchmaking is based purely off your ping and trying to get you into the lowest latency servers it can. Now, on top of the welcome playlist, there is of course a ranked mode, which I'll touch more on in a little bit, but that does also have SBMM, which is obviously kind of a requirement in ranked because it wouldn't make sense to do ranked with no skill-based matchmaking. And so again, there is skill-based matchmaking for those who want it. If you want a more like sweaty hardcore experience where you can grind the ranks, that is available. And so essentially there is skill-based matchmaking for those who want it, and there is also no skill-based matchmaking for those who don't want it as well. Because of the lack of SBMM, this does feel like it is the first kind of genuinely casual gameplay that I've experienced in a shooter, probably outside of Battlefield in, I don't know how long now, probably 5 to 10 years. It feels like every other game is just riddled with SBMM. Some games it obviously works fine for, I think like battle royales and stuff, that's completely fine. But when it comes to a 6v6 shooter, I don't want to be sweating my dick off every single game just to go even. And so I think that is going to please a lot of people, that is pretty much what this game is going to be. A genuinely casual first-person shooter that we have not really had, at least in the smaller scale, in a very long time. Now, before we get into the content the game is launching with, as well as what we're getting after launch too, if you guys are new to the channel and you are interested in more XDefiant content, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. There is so much more content on the way. I'm going to be exclusively focusing on XDefiant all throughout launch, so make sure you don't miss out. Now, speaking of launch, here is all of the content we will be getting at launch. And I should say before we get into it, the game is technically launching in what they're calling pre-season. That will last 6 weeks before we do enter season 1, and then we will start getting new content as well. So in pre-season, which again is just the official launch, we will be starting out with 14 maps. That will be 10 arena maps, which are just your typical 6v6 type of maps. There will also be 4 progression maps, which are essentially for the progressive game modes like Escort, which need to be longer and I guess more linear. And so 10 arena maps and 4 progression maps obviously equals 14 maps in total. Now, I touched on the factions earlier on. There will be 5 factions at launch. Once again, all of these are from different Ubisoft IPs and franchises that I'm sure most of you guys have heard of before. So firstly, we have the Libertad, who are from Far Cry 6. They have sort of healing focused abilities. There are then the Phantoms from Ghost Recon, who have, I guess, more tanky type abilities. There is Echelon from Splinter Cell, who are more stealthy and have detection based abilities. The Cleaners from The Division, who are, if you've played The Division, very fond of lighting fires, so they have pyrotechnic based abilities. And then lastly, there is DedSec from Watch Dogs, who have the more hacker based abilities. Like I said, those are the 5 launching with the game, but there will obviously be more after launch, but I'll touch on that in just a second. The game will also be launching with 24 weapons to start out with, as well as 44 different attachment options. And then lastly, we will be launching with 5 game modes, those being Hotshot, which is essentially kill confirmed from Call of Duty, if you guys have played that. If you haven't, it is essentially team deathmatch, but instead of just earning points when you get a kill, when you kill someone, they will drop essentially dog tags, and you have to go and pick up the dog tags to actually get the score on the board. So that is essentially their alternative to TDM. They said they don't really want to put TDM in there because it doesn't have an objective, and that's not really what they want this game to be, which I actually really agree with. There is also Domination, which is just the typical 3 flag game mode. I'm sure you guys have all played that. There's also Occupy, which is pretty much like King of the Hill or Headquarters from Call of Duty. Those are the 3 arena modes, but then there are also some progression modes, like I mentioned before, those being Escort, which is pretty self-explanatory. It is just an attack and defend game mode with different rounds where you need to escort the payload up the map from the very beginning all the way to the end. And then lastly, there is Zone Control, which is another progression type mode like Escort, but it is kind of a mix of that and Domination, where there is zones that you need to control to move further up the map. In a way, it is almost a bit similar to Rush from Battlefield in a way, but just without planting bombs. Instead of planting the bombs, you need to essentially just capture an objective similar to Domination, but then once you capture those objectives, you move to the next phase of the map. Now, something else that we know we're getting is ranked mode, which will run pretty similar to ranked in every other single game, so not too much to go through there. What I will say is that the preseason actually has ranked practice mode. So ranked will not be starting in the preseason. It will start with season 1, and the practice ranked mode will essentially sort of simulate ranked, but there won't be actual ranks to grind for. So it's more just there for us to get used to how the mode works and stuff like that. And then, like I said, in season 1, the actual rank grinding will begin. The reason that they are doing the practice ranked mode is that it is actually very different than the regular 6v6. There will be 4v4 modes in ranked, so it will be slightly smaller scale, meaning it's going to be obviously a bit less chaotic and a little bit more strategic. And the other thing with ranked is that there is no hotshot mode, so it is only the 4 other modes that I mentioned earlier. Hotshot is obviously a little bit hard to do with ranked because it is a little bit less objective based. Now, all of that I've gone through just there is essentially what we're getting at launch, but in terms of the year one roadmap, they have essentially confirmed everything that we're going to be getting in the first year, and obviously the game will be supported beyond year one. This is just giving a quick example of what we'll be getting in the first year. Year one will include 4 different seasons, meaning that essentially each season will be roughly 3 months, and in each season we'll be getting 3 new maps, 3 new weapons, and 1 faction per season as well. That is guaranteed every single season. And then on top of that, they have also mentioned there'll be new game modes and stuff like that. There will be other content. It's just not going to be as strict. So for example, maybe in season 1 we don't get any new modes, but then, you know, maybe season 2 and 3 we do. I think they're leaving that a little bit more open just so that they can see how it goes. But in terms of the guaranteed content, like I said, there will be 3 maps, 3 weapons, and 1 faction every single season. Now, that is all of the confirmed stuff, but there is also a lot of, I guess, talks of other stuff in the pipeline. This is not necessarily guaranteed, but it is all but guaranteed. It has been talked about by the likes of Mark Rubin, so this isn't just speculation. It is stuff they have literally talked about on Twitter and stuff like that. One thing that is all but confirmed is there will be a search and destroy, or like one life type of mode, where obviously you'll load into a game and you've got to go and plant the bomb, or if you're on the defending team, you've got to defend the bomb sites. But if you die, you are out for that round until it starts the next round. So we will be getting a mode like that. I don't think it'll be called search and destroy, but it will essentially be the exact same thing, and will no doubt have like 12 rounds or something like that to determine which team wins. Something else that Mark Rubin has talked about a lot is a prestige system like the original Call of Duties, where you'd get to the max rank, and then instead of just being at max rank and you just can't unlock anything and it's kind of boring, you can prestige, and then you would pretty much go back to level 1, but you get a slight bonus for that. In the old CODs, it used to be, for example, you would get an extra created class slot, or you could bring a weapon from level 55 back to level 1 and help you grind your way back up the ranks and stuff like that. So again, that isn't confirmed. They have not said like we 100% will be putting prestige in the game, but they have talked about it enough that I'd be shocked if it doesn't make its way in there. I do think that'll be something that we get down the line though, rather than at launch, just because no one's going to be the max rank within like a day of launch. So they'll give us a bit of time to level up, and then I'm sure they'll implement stuff like that after maybe season 1 or even maybe season 2. But that is pretty much everything you need to know about XDefiant. Hopefully that has you guys keen for launch, and if it does have you keen for launch, keep your eyes peeled as there is plenty more content on the way. I will also be streaming on launch day as well, so if you are keen to see a bit of gameplay potentially early, because obviously in Australia our time zone is a fair few hours ahead, then be sure to turn on those notifications so you don't miss out on some of that gameplay. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there in the